these difficult conversations.
So the movement is about equality.
That was a really intense debate.
Let's just keep it strictly about facts and we'll be good.
I mean, this is a verbal fight. I mean,
it is.
We invite you to be a part of the league and participate in actually debating.
Can you hear me now?
What's up, everybody? I'm your host for the evening, Dr. Bruce Strouble, and you are now tuned into the Great Debate League. So as you all may be aware, we live in the age of information. However, in many cases, we're bombarded with so much information, it's difficult to know what to trust, and that makes it hard for us to act on good information, right? So at the Great Debate League, we attempt to resolve this problem by bringing together scholars, activists, educators, and subject matter experts with opposing views in hopes that we could settle their differences using fact-based arguments. I hope that you could all stay with us until the end as we rely on your votes to determine who is the greater debater. So before we get started, I want to let you know the Great Debate League is brought to you by Citizens for a Sustainable Future Incorporated, a nonprofit action-oriented think tank focused on creating sustainable Black American communities. And you can learn more at c4sf.org. So tonight's premise: financial literacy is more significant than living wages for determining economic stability for African Americans. It's a tough one. Debating the affirmative position tonight, we have Arthur Paker. Arthur Paker holds a bachelor's of science in accounting and business and is in the process of launching a nonprofit organization called CRIP, Community Reservation in Progress. Community Reservation in Progress. This is going to focus on all its efforts on teaching Black Americans the power of financial literacy. So we have our own financial literacy expert in the house. His opposition tonight, debating the negative position, Dr. Mu-Tor Flood. Dr. Flood is a visiting professor of psychology at Bethune-Cookman University. Go Wildcats. He also has taught at Florida A&M University and Los Angeles Valley College. He is currently working on a number of books related to African Americans, the impacts of capitalism, work, and Black nationalism. So let's get into tonight's guiding definitions. Financial literacy. We're defining this tonight as the ability to understand and use various financial skills, including personal financial management, budgeting, and investing. Living wage. This is the minimum income necessary for a worker to meet their basic needs. Economic stability. The ability to consistently provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, education, and healthcare for oneself and their dependents. And the parameter for this debate is it's limited to the United States. So we'll be talking about the premise as it contains to the United States. This is an unranked debate, so our rules for the night: there will be no personal attacks of any kind, no profanity, no interrupting. Both participants are allowed to call a fact check timeout only during their designated speaking times. So we're going to now enter into our first round. This is where both of our participants are going to get to offer a opening statement. We'll first have Mr. Arthur Paker. You're going to the affirmative debater. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you for having me on here. One thing I want to say is that as you said about livable wages do give you the means and income to sustain the necessary things to have you go through the day or go throughout life. But what it also doesn't allow you to have, it doesn't allow you to for education, debt repayment, the ability to take care of your parents when they get older. It also does not allow home ownership or help you save for retirement. Financial literacy can offer all of those and more. That's what I'm here to argue about. Well, not argue, but debate about, to let you know that African American people, we need financial literacy. We've been on a livable wage. We've been on a livable wage. It's called the welfare system, and it has not worked. So it has to come down to something else. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Paker. Excellent summation. We're now going to have Dr. Flood. You have 3 minutes, sir.
This debate is on which yields better economic outcomes for Black folks, financial literacy training or a living wage. I'm going to bury this debate before it even starts. So get the shovel. There's no evidence that supports financial literacy doing better than increases in a living wage. Here is the research on financial literacy. 2 meta-analyses, the gold standard of research, were done to find out the long-term effects of financial literacy training. The first study found that interventions to improve financial literacy explains only 0.1% of future financial behaviors. Not 10%, not even 1%, but 0.1%. The author stated, like other education, financial education decays over time. Even large interventions with many hours of instruction have negligible effects on behavior 20 months or more from the time of the intervention. A follow-up meta-analysis done in 2017 found that financial education is less effective for low-income clients and people in low and lower middle-income economies, basically Black folk. So what about the other side of this equation, the increases in the living wage? Well, living wage studies collected data in over 25 cities who had to adopt living wage increase policies, places like Boston, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Jersey City, etc. They found that living wages boosted the wages of low-wage workers and that they reduced urban poverty. A follow-up study explored the effects of living wages on low-wage workers and low-income families, and they found that those people who are somewhat below and somewhat above the poverty line are also helped by living wages. Current estimates of a living wage is from $43,000 a year in poorer states like Kentucky to $61,000 a year in more expensive states like Hawaii. Is my opponent going to say that financial literacy training Blacks will save more, buy Black more, bank more, secure more home ownership more? Maybe, but he would be wrong about the outcomes. I'm not sure what my opponent is going to argue when he has no data to back up his points. And if you listen very closely to his opening statement, he really just conceded the whole argument, the whole debate. Thank you.
All right. So both of our debaters came out swinging. We are now going into our lightning round. This is round 2. This will allow for open cross-examination between both participants to engage in interrogation of their opponent's position. This is a shared time frame for both debaters. Audience, please listen carefully and start to pose questions for our debaters as Q&A is the next round for round 3. So right now we're going to bring both debaters up. All right, gentlemen, have at it.
Oh, you can go first, brother.
Yeah, I mean, so in your opening statement, you basically conceded the point. You said, hey, a living wage does what it needs to do in order to secure economic stability, which was the point of contention for this debate. You added in some things that weren't a part of financial education, but you maintained and validated my argument. What say you?
Oh, so you're right, but at the end of the day, also the welfare system also gives us a livable wage. Wouldn't you say so?
No. So there's a difference between the welfare state, minimum wage, and a living wage. So like I said in my opening statement, a living wage is somewhere between $41,000 a year and $61,000 a year, depending on what states you live on in the U.S.
So also a livable wage is it satisfies basic needs, correct? Such as adequate shelter, which somebody living in the projects and low income housing. That's what would you say that's correct?
I wouldn't necessarily say that's correct. I'm going to go more off what a living wage would be on a yearly basis. If you make $41,000 a year to $61,000 a year, you're probably not going to be living in the PJs.
But once again, I'm just saying that right there proves that livable wages will show. I'm saying, how can I say it? Hold on, sorry. This is my first debate. I'm sorry.
Let's go. Go for it.
It acquires adequate shelter. So the PJs is one of those things that requires adequate shelter. Is considered adequate shelter. Being on food stamps gives you food, which also is part of livable wage. Healthcare and childcare is also part of a livable wage, and also is done by government assistance, which has not been good for Black people whatsoever, African Americans.
So again, the problem that's occurring is that you're conflating the welfare state with living wages. So these are two different things. All right. A living wage is a wage that you could live on. And I set the parameters based off the studies that are out there on what a living wage would look like throughout the US. That's $41,000 to $61,000 a year, which is more than the median wage for a family of 5 in America.
But it's only given basic necessary. Financial literacy is good for Black people due to the fact that it will bring us out of poverty. A livable wage. Yes, it will.
No,
it can't. It can. If every Black person in America receive financial literacy, within 2 generations, we would be out of poverty.
So let's talk about this.
If we follow the schedule,
you have no evidence to support this. There's no data supporting what you're saying. This is something you're making up on the fly.
No, I'm not making up on the fly. You're right. There's no data, but there's also.
So if there's no data, if there's no data, how are you supporting what you're saying?
Would you say NFL players? Would you say majority of the NFL, 71% or 64% of the NFL is Black?
Okay.
Did you know within 5 years they go bankrupt? Don't you think they make a livable wage? Because of not having financial literacy, they go bankrupt within 5 years. Shaquille O'Neal said it himself. He spent $1 million in a day because he didn't have financial literacy.
So now you're adding in a special class of people who are highly paid and comparing them to the broad spectrum of Black citizens, over 40 million Black citizens in America. If the 40 million
I'm going off of livable wages.
Hold on. If the 40 million Black Americans in the United States were getting $40,000 to $60,000 a year as payment for their positions, knowing what we know data-wise is that at similar levels of education, Black people have similar levels of financial literacy to their white counterparts. The reason why we see such disparities between whites and Blacks is not due to their financial illiteracy. It's due to things such as racism, and other things and other policies that are constraining and holding people back. It's expensive being poor, all right? And so if you had a living wage, it would go a long way to solving poverty. Like I said in my opening statement, there are studies that actually show, when you implement a living wage, it lifts Black folks, the poorest, out of poverty.
Can I? Where's the study at? Can I get a fact check?
I mean, sure.
Because I'm just saying, because when I tried to look that up, I didn't see that or find that. Is this a study done by a university, or is this study done by one person, or is it a?
It's done by a team. I mean, there's a couple of different studies, but I want to get back to. I mean, we could do the fact check. That's fine.
Yeah, I would like the fact check.
However, what is most important is that you're critiquing my studies, but you have no evidence to support your position. You have no studies, which you've already said you have no evidence to support your assertions. So what are you making your claims based off of?
I'm making my claim statement off of one from being somebody from the PJs that learned financial literacy. That I guess is anecdotal. I guess if that's the correct word, I would say it's just a singular.
It
person.
Is. It's anecdotal.
But at the same time, yeah, thank you for correcting that.
No problem.
But then at the same time, having other friends. Once again, what is it again? Anecdotal. Having friends and seeing them go through financial literacy and seeing what has done from them versus them being in poverty, getting into financial literacy and actually doing, and it's actually working, it's doing something for themselves.
So what this is called psychologically is called person who reasoning. So person who reasoning is questioning a well-established finding because you know a person who violates the established finding. For example, a student may insist that eating a steak, baked potato loaded with butter and sour cream and cheese and salt for dinner is healthy because his grandfather did so every night for 50 years and lived to be 90 years old. So that's not how capitalism works. If everybody got financial literacy, we're not all turning into millionaires. That's not how.
No. Financial literacy has nothing to do with turning into millionaires.
That's not how the game works.
Financial literacy really doesn't have nothing to do and turn into complete millionaires. It will give you, see, when you're asking, my thing is, this is how I look at it. When you're asking for a livable wage, you're still giving a person a crutch. That's what you're doing, because they're, like I said, and they don't have any room for education. They have no room from home ownership. They have no room for retirement on a livable wage.
So that's not, again, that's just not true. If
no, it is true. It is true. You can actually check that livable wage. That's what it says. It says it doesn't give you. It does not give you room. It does not give you room for debt repayment. So let's
work this out. Let's work this out. If people are making $40,000 to $60,000 a year, they could do the things that you are saying.
No,
so this argument is nil.
No. Livable wages is really only just for the bare essentials. That's it. It gives you adequate transportation. Adequate transportation does not mean anything. A car. It can mean taking the bus.
So again, what you're doing is you are comparing a living wage to welfare. It is not the same.
That's what a livable wage is. If you look at it,
that is not. It is not.
It is. Look, if you actually look up the definition of livable wage. Look up the definition of livable wage.
We actually had a definition of living wage that you agreed upon.
Yeah, I did agree upon that. But if you expand
let's read it. The living wage, the minimum income necessary for a worker to meet their basic needs.
Basic needs. So that means there's no retirement. There's no retirement. There's no home ownership. What livable wage would do, it would still keep us where we're at.
So again, that's not what the definition states. You're adding on to it.
I'm not adding on to it.
You're adding on to it and saying what it doesn't do, and saying what it doesn't do. And I'm saying I have the data to support that financial education, financial literacy doesn't work, and that a living wage actually has worked in taking people out of poverty.
And in Switzerland, they say, would you say in Switzerland they give people livable wages in Switzerland?
So I'm not as familiar on the work of Sweden, so I won't talk on that.
But everybody would say that if you actually look it up in Sweden. Yes, I know what you said. The debate was based in United States, but when I asked if I can use another country for an example, it was said it was okay. So in Sweden, they give people a livable wage, but 13% of their people are still in poverty.
Okay.
But as you can see, a livable wage still does not matter. You're still going to have poverty because at the end of the day, a livable wage, if we gave every Black American financial literacy, we would be out of.
You keep saying what would happen, but you have no data to support what you're saying.
But
you're just throwing things. You're throwing concepts out of the sky.
No, I can also go on a livable wage. I can also go. Everything goes up. I can go on the economy part of it.
Go wherever you want.
It would still
be
a race. It would still be a race that we won't be able to catch up to if we're on a livable wage. Because if you look at things right now,
who are we racing against?
Everybody I've ever talked to and every group I've ever been in, Black group I've ever been in, it's a wage gap between Blacks and whites. A big one, $17,000 is the average Black American's net wealth versus $160,000.
So you don't think that would change if you're making $60,000 a year?
It will not change because do you know what net worth? You know what net worth is? What it calculates?
I know what a net worth is.
Livable wage doesn't allow you to have savings, doesn't allow you to invest. It does not.
Again, for the third time, that's not what the definition of living wage is.
Yes, it is. If we're going off the definition I see what you're saying.
That's what I'm going off.
No, but I see what you're doing because we're going off just that small definition of livable wage that we
It's what
agreed
you agreed
upon.
to, my man. It's what you agreed to.
I get what you. I see what you're doing. I get what you're doing. But if you actually go and fact check what actual real livable wage is,
that was your job. That was your job during this debate.
And I did do that. No, I did do that.
You said you had no data. So what are you talking about?
No, I have no. There's no data that you said that proves that financial literacy is the key. But giving,
I actually have data that supports my argument that financial education doesn't work, and that
financial education and financial literacy is two different things.
You could use the different term, financial literacy. Let's go with that.
Financial literacy. Let's go financial literacy.
Even worse.
Financial literacy. Financial literacy. Once again, livable wage will not close that gap between black and white. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Between black and white, a livable wage will not close the gap.
So now what you're talking about is a different topic of closing the racial wealth gap. We could talk about that.
And that's what financial literacy would do.
We could talk about that, but that wasn't the debate. The debate was, hey, would giving black people a living wage raise them into an economic stable position? And the answer is definitively yes.
It will not. We will still be low on the totem pole.
That is a comparison about the racial wealth gap and where we stand relative to other
people.
We would
be exactly. We would still.
That is a different argument, sir.
We would still be exactly where we're at. If we're given a livable wage, we'll still be exactly where we're at. Because at the end of the day, even though you say
that is empirically not true.
It is too true.
Most black people do not make $60,000 a year, sir. That's not true.
But once again, you are right. We don't make $60,000 a year. But once again, you are because the definition is where it's at.
You agree to that definition.
That's the only reason why you kind of got me at a standstill, because the definition.
I got you at a standstill because you agreed to those terms and you have no data to support what you're saying.
That's why I agreed to those terms.
And early on, you conceded that I was right on this debate.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
I didn't.
You could roll that beautiful bean footage, like they say in the commercials.
No, I didn't concede to it. I didn't concede to it.
You did.
I didn't.
Anybody
financial literacy.
Anybody can relook at the tape.
A livable wage is nothing but another step for what? It's a different type of welfare for black people. Whether how you want to see it or not, it's a different type of
welfare. Is a different thing. This is not WIC check, sir. Making $60,000 a year making $60,000 a year is not WIC check, sir.
WIC's not.
I don't know what you're talking about.
WIC's not welfare. Two different things.
Gotcha.
WIC's not welfare.
Welfare is not a living wage, sir.
Okay, if I live in the projects, if we go, well, see, we're only tied to that small definition that we agreed upon, and that's what you keep going. That's what you keep going on. But if you go and look up, the data for what a livable wage
really is, and you said you didn't.
I did do it. It only gives you adequate.
So where is it, sir?
It gives you adequate shelter. Where is it? It gives you. I'm saying it gives you adequate shelter. The projects. It gives you enough to feed your family.
A living wage has nothing to do with shelter, sir.
Healthcare.
A living wage has to do with the money you make. We're talking about from $42,000 a year.
We're talking about the money we make.
$63,000 a year, sir.
But at the end of the day, okay, it's still not going to be adequate due to the fact that now we have inflation. We have inflation. We give people livable wages. We have inflation. Now inflation goes up. Now we're going to keep going here. We're going to keep going here. Black people are not going to get to where they need to get to.
So your hyperinflation scenario doesn't pan out with the data that is readily available.
If you look at it right now, inflation is really high, and it's really showing that. Yeah, like you go to
Okay, very intense, gentlemen. Very intense. We got a lot of feedback. We're about to get some questions for the next round 3 Q&A. Our first question coming up. All right, this is going to go to both debaters. Okay, we're going to let the affirmative take the first question. Arthur, does financial literacy or a livable wage matter if capitalism is designed to maintain a wealth gap?
Yes, it does matter, because at the end of the day, financial literacy actually gets you into what they will call capitalism a little bit, because it teaches you and shows you that, hey, I can literally make 50 cents into $1, or I can literally make 50 cents into $2. So yes, it does matter when it comes. I mean, if capitalism is designed to me, yeah. So capitalism, though, I'm sorry, this is my first debate. I'm a little nervous. I apologize.
It's okay.
So financial literacy will allow us to be part of that capitalist system versus a livable wage. A livable wage would not allow us to be part of that system. And now we're not going to get into black capitalism because that's totally two different things. I believe in. I don't like black capitalism is not the same as financial literacy, but it will allow us to get into that branch, into being able to put those things in place that, I guess, quote unquote, as they would say, capitalists do.
Dr. Flood, same question. Does financial literacy or a livable wage matter if capitalism is designed to maintain a wealth gap?
Yes, it does matter, because the evidence shows that if you institute a living wage, you lift people out of poverty. And those on the lowest level of the poverty line get the most benefit out of it. Again, we're talking about $41,000 to $61,000 a year as far as the living wage is concerned, depending on where you live in the United States. With that intel, if you're making $40,000 to $60,000 a year, all right, you're not living in the PJs eating spam sandwiches. All right.
You are.
My opponent just said you are. If you're making $60,000 a year, you're eating spam sandwiches. Most people here would disagree. I concede my time.
100.
Okay. Our next question. Is financial literacy necessary with a livable wage? We're going to give this one back to you first, Dr. Flood.
Is financial literacy necessary with a living wage? Sure, the more information, the merrier. I mean, I have a Ph.D. I love education. I know education by itself doesn't do the job it needs to do. So you could give people all the financial literacy information that you have at your disposal. But if people don't have capital, money, resources to use that information, it's not going to work the way it should. And that's what we see. Because again, studies show that the financial literacy levels between blacks and whites are very similar. The reason why there's a racial wealth gap is because whites have more capital, more money, more resources, more intergenerational wealth, and less impediments such as racism and structural issues to contend with. That's all.
All right, Mr. Parker, same question.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is financial literacy necessary with a livable wage?
Now, the first half I can agree with Dr. Flood. I do believe if you have financial literacy and a livable wage, you can rise up, and I believe it is necessary, given the fact that 63% of millennials that make $100,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. So financial literacy and a livable wage would be good in that instance.
Okay. All right. This question is going directly to Mr. Parker. How will financial literacy help you if you do not make enough to make ends meet in the first place? If you are in the red, how is it more effective at moving you out of the red than living wages?
Okay, so how I look at it is, if I know financial literacy and I'm in the red, I have kids. I teach my kids financial literacy. They follow my program. Unfortunately, yes, I'm still going to be in the red. I would still be in the red if I can take necessaries. Most people that are in poverty, they'll still buy cigarettes, they'll still buy weed, they'll still buy certain numbers of those things. Am I lying? I'm not lying. They'll still buy certain numbers of those things. Now, if I can cut that out and I can put that towards my financial literacy, put it towards, a stock that's, I take $5 and put it towards a stock that can actually let it grow. Yes, I do believe that you can still do it if you're in the red. But at the same time, if you're looking at your legacy as your kids, you can teach your kids. And as they get older, they can actually implement what you taught to them.
Dr. Flood, this question is directly to you. How much is the livable wage exactly, and what is basic needs?
So like I said earlier, studies show that if we were trying to figure out the living wage for Americans based off where they live, it would range anywhere between $41,000 a year and $62,000 a year, roughly. All right. Next part of that question, what is basic needs? Things like where you live, what you can eat, being able to have some kind of level of discretionary disposable income to do with what you will, things of that nature. I just want to credit my good friend here, Arthur, for actually throwing out a statistic. It looked like there was some data that he does have for his argument. So that's good. Now let's talk about this savings thing. All right. This poor idea that Black people are in the position that they're in because they don't know how to save. They need this financial literacy to help them. All right. That's not true at all either. The work by Giltman and Wolf in 2004 found that once income is controlled, if anything, Black families actually have a slightly higher savings rate than their white counterparts. So that falls through as well.
Okay. All right. Okay. That takes us through our question and answer period. I think you both did a great job there. We are now moving into our fourth and final round where you will both be allowed to give uninterrupted closing statements. We allow the affirmative to give the first closing statement. Arthur Parker, you have 3 minutes.
So even though my opponent came very prepared, he found statistics I wasn't able to find. I'm still waiting for the fact check on some of them. But once again, a livable wage, if we go on the parameters that we set, he got that. But financial literacy will still be is still better than a livable wage, giving us a livable wage. Because I can't pass down a livable wage. Can't pass down a livable wage. I can pass down financial literacy and make sure that my future generations are okay and good if they stick to the program. That's what they have to do. Other than that, that's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Parker. All right. We're going to give it now to Dr. Mu-Tor Flood. You have 3 minutes for your closing statement, sir.
So I've already began to bury this argument in the opening. I have now fully buried this argument 6 feet under, and I'm taking the shovel and patting down the dirt and placing flowers at the tombstone. I previously showed that living wage increases have taken more people out of poverty than financial literacy ever has and ever will. I already proved with research that this financial literacy argument has no basis in reality. You can't give financial literacy training to people with no finances, little to no resources, capital, money, and expect that somehow with the financial education, they will magically turn into Bill Gates. Wealth generation doesn't work like that. Black folks are not going to save their way to wealth, nor home ownership their way to wealth, bank black their way to wealth, or any other wild ideas promoted by Black capitalist advocates. Large shifts in Black wealth have been due to changes in government policy, like the GI Bill, the New Deal, or after the Civil Rights Movement, or the need to employ Blacks during World War II. Increases in the Black middle class occurred even when some of these policies were racist against Blacks. All right. Financial literacy has never and will never be the driver of wealth of Black folks because we live in a segregated and racist society and economy. Those who create and sustain great wealth control the government, who then creates favorable laws for those same rich benefactors. Again, the middle class is mostly created by government programs and shifts in employment opportunities. I will leave you with this final thought / poem for this failed argument. The idea of financial literacy has no basis in research history. It will fail because it has no value, and all it brings is heartbreak and misery. The end.
Whew. Okay. Very great debate tonight. Thank you, audience, for being here. I really want to thank both of our debaters. Arthur Parker, I know this is your first time, but you did an excellent job. This is really a tough platform to get on. You were up against one of our great debaters, Dr. Mu-Tor Flood, and you, as always, Dr. Flood, you performed well. As always, we had very critical discussions on important issues, and we're able to learn from both of our presenters, and that's what really matters for us at the Great Debate League. We want to, again, remember to check out our website, Citizens for a Sustainable Future, c4sf.org, who brought us this event tonight. Audience, we ask that you now take the time to use our new scorecard system to let us know how you score each participant's performance. This is a quick form, and it'll only take you about 2.5 minutes to complete. Please score each debater's performance in presenting fact-based arguments, meaning they provided facts to support their arguments, their subject matter expertise, they demonstrated an understanding of the subject at hand, their persuasiveness, they were logical and convincing, their elocution, their ability to use clear and effective communication, and their rebuttals, the ability to address their opponent's arguments. Again, thank you for watching tonight. Thank you for listening. We ask that you support to keep this program running. You could donate through our Cash App so that we can continue to grow and keep this platform moving forward. Also, please check us out on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the page. We also invite you to become a member of our Patreon page. We're going to share. We will have a post-debate analysis. We'll get our commissioners up here to talk about the debate, which will start shortly. Make sure we're going to share that link now so that you can join us. I want you to all have a great night. And remember, speak the truth. Good night, everyone.